do we get our emails through all the clutter? I don't know about you, but I get about 150 emails every hour. So it doesn't give me a whole lot of time to decide the worthiness of every email I get. And so more often than not, it's delete, 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 right? It used to be that most of the messages we got were pretty irrelevant, so it was a pretty easy decision to make. But now, with marketing automation being adopted more and more, the messaging that we're starting to get is now more relevant than ever. So now it's even harder to get your email through the clutter. Well, it turns out that there's about 5 subconscious filters that most of us use to define the worthiness of any given email. What I'd like to do is walk you through those filters, see if it isn't a similar way that you approach whether or not your emails get deleted or not, and then let's talk about how we might use those filters to our advantage. So there's a series of gates or filters that we all use to evaluate the worthiness of any particular email that we get. So we do this very quickly, usually subconsciously. It only takes a second or two for us to go through it. But if you were to think about how you evaluate emails, follow along and see if this makes sense for you. The very first thing we do is we see who the email is from. If we don't recognize it, or if it's from a source that we really don't care about, we usually delete it right then and there. If we accept who it's from, the next thing we look at is the subject line. Is it compelling? Does it answer the question, what's in it for me? Is it relevant? Is it pertinent to my world at this exact moment? If the answer is no, chances are it's deleted as well. So if we accept who it's from and we accept the subject line, the next thing we do is we take a look at the call to action in the email itself. Is it simple to do? Is it going to take a lot of effort? Is it understandable? If it's not any of those, we typically delete it as well. So if it passes the from, subject line, and call to action, the next thing we do is it urgent? Is it something that I need to respond to right away? If the answer is no, chances are we won't outright delete the email. We'll probably save it, but then forget about it. So here's my inbox. Now, I don't know how you evaluate your emails, but it used to be that I would evaluate them from the bottom up. But then I would respond to earlier emails, and then as I got up the thread, realized that there were updates made, which made me realize I shouldn't have responded. So I don't do that anymore. I now work from the top down. So let's just start right from the top. Costco news. I spend so much money there every week as it is, I don't even care what they're offering. Delete. Customer experience matrix happens to be the exact same thing as what's in the subject line. Customer experience matrix. That's a delete in my book. Friends of the funnel group members. In fact, all of these LinkedIns, look at this. The subject lines are pretty much worthless. 4 new discussions, 28 new discussions. Yeah, like I'm going to read that. None of these have any benefit to me whatsoever. Big delete. Brad Pitt. Hey dude, come to our party night. I know who it is. Subject line makes sense. Looks like it's a pretty easy call to action. It's definitely urgent because it's happening tonight, so I'll definitely respond to that. Jennifer Aniston, same thing. I know who she is. Subject line makes sense. Pretty simple call to action. Looks like I'm going to have to decide which one to go to. Free white paper on white papers. Now, look at this. Wow, this is crazy. There's like 72 links in here. Please tell me you don't send emails like this. I don't even know where to begin. Delete. Bill McGinnis from Stadia happens to be a colleague. I love the subject line. Does your newsletter taste like chicken? Doesn't look like it's urgent, but it does look interesting. I'll probably save it for later and then probably forget about it. Join our webinar. Horrible, horrible subject line. There's no benefit what's in it for me. I am about to delete it, but thanks to the preview pane, I at least get a sense of what it is. Getting email through the clutter. Well, that sounds interesting. The problem is the webinar isn't until February 15th of next year. Delete. Bank of Zurich, your account has been hacked. Uh-oh. I do have an account at Bank of Zurich. This does not look like spam. I am definitely going to look at this. Dear Mr. Kellogg, we're sorry to inform you that your Zurich bank account has been hacked. Regrettably, your account balance is now 0. Accounts with a 0 balance are charged a $150 maintenance fee. Please remit this amount at your earliest convenience. Nice. P.S. Effective January 1st, 2012, we'll be reducing our ATM fees from $30 per transaction to $25. Well, like it or not, I do have to respond to that. And lastly, Here's somebody who's added me as a connection on top letters. Very nice. So now that we know the subconscious filters that we all tend to use to define the worthiness of an email, let's see if we can't turn those filters to our advantage. All right, well, let's take another look at my inbox and see if we can't leverage the filters we've just reviewed. The first thing we already know that we typically do is look at who it's from. Now, you're probably focusing on the names. Even the people that I pretend to know are going to pop out more than just a company name. And the reason for that is we like to get emails from people, not from companies. So where it makes sense, make sure that you add not only your company name, but who it's from as well, right there in this field so that it pops up. The second thing that we want to focus on is, of course, the subject line. I don't know about you, but when I was designing emails that needed to get out the door in the next hour and a half, the last thing I thought about was subject line. And right before it was ready to launch, we'd say, oh wow, we never created a subject line, and we'd slap one together and send it out. Well, now that we know how important subject line really is, we really want to focus in. It is incredibly difficult to write what's in it for me in 6 words or less in a subject line. But it's really critical to answer that question, right? You see in this case, hey dude, come to our party. Well, that makes sense. Free white paper on white papers, it doesn't make much sense to me. Obviously, you see the benefit of subject lines. It makes a huge difference if it's meaningful and relevant. The third thing we take a look at is, all right, who it's from, subject line, what's in it for me, is it easy to deal with? Right? What do I have to do to respond? So if you're getting an email with a long sea of copy and there's a thumbnail to a white paper, you may or may not want to click through it. It just depends on how easy it is, right? One thing you want to avoid is this mess where you have multiple calls to action. The more calls to action you have, the more confused your audience is going to be and the less likely they are of ever taking any action. Ideally, you want one link in your entire email, and that's the button that gets you to the asset or to whatever the call to action is. That's it. No other distractions than that. Finally, if we've gotten past all those gates, we want to make sure where it's appropriate that our message is urgent. Now, let me preface this by saying don't fake urgency. People will see right through it. But a great example is a webinar that starts tomorrow. That's urgent. I need to respond to that. If it's a webinar that starts next year, I'm not really that concerned about it. So leverage time when you can. That's a great natural sense of urgency. But when you can't, you can't. If there is just no urgency in your email, then at least try and make it important. And the way you do that is by making it somewhat scarce. So if you're offering a white paper that is garden variety that anybody can get just about anywhere, that's not very scarce. But if you're offering up some specific IP that's yours and yours alone, and you're only offering it to a few people, that's scarce, and that makes it important. So leverage these filters to your best advantage. Make sure that testing comes into play. These 4 filters are by far the most meaningful things to test. Beyond that, the uplift might be not very measurable, but these 4 tend to get you the biggest bang for the buck. Thanks for watching.